names are Navita, Garib, and Tre'Ana Thompson, and our veteran is Pusch.
He was born July 11, 1928, and his current address is 2075 Southwest 26th Terrace in Delray Beach, Florida.
His relationship to us is a family friend, and he served in the Korean War.
His branch was Army, and his rank was First Lieutenant.
He served in the United States and in Korea. Okay, so first we're going to ask you about your pre-war life.
My pre-war life?
Yes. So can you tell me where you were born and about your parents and any siblings that you may have?
Okay, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I had a brother, Fritz, who since passed away, and I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota until I graduated from the University of Minnesota and went to work for an advertising firm. And then the Korean War started, and I just missed World War II, so I was in the first draft call for the Korean War. And I was drafted in October. I think the war started in June, and I was drafted in October. And I went into stop me if I'm...
Go ahead.
I went into of course we didn't know where we were going. They had a ceremony for us in the City Hall, I think it was City Hall or someplace, and they marched us down. There was quite a few of us. They marched us down the street to the train depot, and our parents and everybody was along the side, you know. And so we got on the train, and we had no idea where we were going. Nobody told us. I don't know if they knew. So we got on this train, and it was several days. We didn't assume we were out of any place where we could recognize anything. And we got to a big freight yard, and there was a man walking alongside a workman, and so we found out from him that this was Chicago. We were in Chicago. But then the train started again and kept going, and we finally ended up in Missouri, in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And so that's where we were for several weeks, I guess, and then they sent us up to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, where we were filled in as a part of a reserve artillery battalion that they called up. And so this artillery battalion, we filled it in more or less. Instead of regular basic training camp, we went to this artillery battalion. And they had the officers, but most of the enlisted men were young men just like us and didn't have any more experience than us, but they had the better positions because they had joined the reserves or something. And so anyway, we all kind of trained together and learned things you have to learn in the Army. Plus they sent us the weapons, which was called a long tom, with a 155 millimeter long tom artillery piece, which is one of the larger pieces they have then. And so we got them, and we learned together how to fire them and work with them. And meanwhile, this happened to be fairly close to my home. I had a car. I had worked, after I got out of college, I worked for this advertising firm, and I had my own car. So I bought the car, and I could go home weekends. And so it was pretty nice, you know. And then when this was in the winter time, which is very cold in Wisconsin, and so we spent a lot of time out in the field, you know, with our artillery pieces. But it was very snowy and cold, and we didn't have a lot of warm clothing because the Army, the material for the Army that they needed in Korea, of course, they weren't going to give us. So all that really warm stuff went to the soldiers where it should have gone. And we were wearing civilian clothes, ski caps and so forth, and some red scarves and whatever, so we didn't look much like soldiers. But in any case, when spring came, we had completed our basic training, we figured. Also, some of us at least got a chance to take a test for OCS to become officer. So I took that. But then, and my job was battery agent, which meant I was I was supposed to take messages in combat. If the phones went out and the radios went out, I was supposed to drive a Jeep and take messages. And but the other thing that job's supposed to entail, stop me if I'm going too long.
No, you're okay.
The other job that position entailed was driving the captain, and or one of the officers, whoever needed a drive. And then Camp McCoy is hilly, and with the snow there were stumps and things, and we'd be going through this deep snow and hit stumps and whatever. And anyway, one of the officers had been a truck driver in civilian life, which was not that far away, but a couple of months ago. He had been a truck driver. So he decided to be grinding the gears, and he'd get kind of sore at me, so he'd drive, and I'd drive a lot of the time. So in any case, when spring came, they gave us, they were going to send some of us to Germany. So we all had shots for Germany, and I think it was Black Plague or something, and about half of us came down and got sick from the shots, but that went away in a week or two. And I somehow, I can't remember how, but I got transferred to Post Special Services as a lifeguard in the pool. It was spring now, and they needed a lifeguard in the pool, and I'd been a lifeguard at a Boy Scout camp. So I got this job as a lifeguard at the pool, and it was the Officers Club pool actually. And so I was there just sitting around the pool and teaching the wives how to swim and so forth. And one day, this lieutenant that I used to have to drive, because he was a better driver than I was, so he'd take over the driving. He came driving up to the fence around the pool, and he was all sweaty and dirty because they were out in the field and he'd been working, and then the other guys were still out in the field, and here I was sitting by this pool all day long. And he said, "You got accepted for OCS, but I would advise you not to go because you're too good here. You probably wouldn't make it at OCS anyway." So I thought about it, and I had to decide within 2 or 3 days or something. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, if I stay here in this pool, working in this pool, it's good for the summer. In the wintertime, they said they were going to give me a job at theater non-com, which means I would have a detail that would clean up a movie theater or something. But you can't work in a pool in the wintertime. But in any case, I thought I wouldn't be worth anything when I got out. I had 3 or 4 years of just sitting around a pool or watching people clean the theater. So I went to OCS anyway. And first I had to go to leadership school, which was an enlisted leadership school. You had to get through that. And that was back at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, so I went back there. Then I went to OCS at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I was there for, I guess it was 90 days or something. It's just a short time for OCS. I got to be a second lieutenant. And OCS was interesting, but it's just like anything else. It wasn't that terrible, it wasn't tough or anything. It was tough, but not that bad. Anyway, after I got out of OCS, they made me an officer. We had to have 6 months troop duty before they sent us overseas because they thought that just brand new second lieutenants wouldn't be worth a darn without some experience. So I was lucky enough to have my troop duty right there at Fort Sill with the school troops that fired the artillery for the cadets, the officers, candidates learning how to adjust artillery fire and so forth. So I was working with school troops. And then when the ROTC boys came in the summertime, I was given the job of the company commander of an ROTC unit. Mine happened to be from Texas A&M. So I took care of them for a couple of weeks or whatever else, and then others. Anyway, then I went overseas. I had to go overseas because that was the whole idea of the whole thing. That's why I was drafted, and that's why I went to school. So I went overseas I went home first, and then I went overseas from San Francisco, and it was, they thought they should rush us over because they happen to need a second lieutenant in the artillery. When you get out of OCS, the first job is forward observer, which means you go with the infantry or whoever's in the front lines, and when you find targets and you call back by radio, telephone, whatever, to the fire direction center, which is where the guns are, and you give them the commands that get where to put the artillery fire, and then you adjust the artillery fire in on the target. So I was going to be a forward observer. Everybody knew that. That was the job. I just started out, and they needed them. They'd had some problems or something, so they needed them, so they flew us over. We flew from Travis Air Force Base in California to Tokyo, and that took a couple of days, and we sat on the floor of the airplane all that time, and I ended up with a prostate infection, like, you know, sitting on the cold floor. So anyway, when we got to Camp Drake, well, I remember we landed at Wake Island, and we landed in Hawaii, and we landed at Wake Island, and then we got to Tokyo, and at Camp Drake, camp there, and I had to go on sick leave, I remember, because of this. I had this pain from this prostate infection, and so I had to get shots, and I had to go there and stand in line, and I remember the same line was for guys getting shots for VD. So I got into quite a few conversations with people that were getting their shots for different reasons than I was. But anyway, then it turned out they didn't need the forward observers that quickly. So they sent us to school because they thought they might have, the Chinese had come into the war, and they thought they might have chemical and biological weapons. And so they thought we should be trained in how to fight chemical, or what to do about chemical and biological weapons. So we went to school at a place called Gifu, which had been the Japanese Annapolis. So it was a very nice place, nice school. So I went there for 2 weeks and learned about chemical and biological weapons, which fortunately I never had to use that information. But then we went on to, took a train down past Fuji and all this beautiful country down the coast to Sasebo. And we got a boat in Sasebo and took a boat to Busan in Korea. Got to Busan, and I remember the first thing they told us that there was they could have it. Or I remember, well, in any case, I think when we came into Sasebo, I remember that they had a band on the dock, and the band was playing, if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. You know, I remember that. Then we went to a camp there, and they said you can have showers. There are showers down here, but the main thing is don't let any get in your mouth or your eyes, because the water comes directly off a rice paddy. So it's not good for your eyes or for your drinking. Then we got on a train, and we went up to, went north, because the fighting was then, there was called the MLR, the Main Line of Resistance, was up north of Seoul. So we took this train, and I ended up in 3rd Division headquarters, and they gave me, boy, I'm going on too long, I think. You want me to stop?
You're good.
Okay. They gave me a, so I got to 3rd Division headquarters anyway, and it turned out that I'd had good efficiency reports in my 6 months troop duty in this ROTC and other work I did, school troops work. So I was treated very nicely by given, they were saying, where would you like to go? Or I said, well, I don't know, I have an artillery battalion, I guess. You know. So they sent me to the, in the division artillery, they have 3 light battalions and 1 medium battalion, or they did then. So they sent me to the medium battalion. They told me that I'd like it because there were a lot of Minnesota people there. That's what they told me, division headquarters. I remember meeting it. I think 2 or 3 Minnesota people were there. Anyway, when I got there, they gave me a captain slot. They gave me the battalion communications officer because they had that opening, and they'd had, and I'd had these good reviews and so forth. So I started out as a captain, in a captain slot. I was still a second lieutenant, but as a communications officer. Well, it turned out that the company commander for headquarters company was a first lieutenant, but he was also a career regular Army communications specialist, you know, that had been, and he knew he was going to go back probably to being a sergeant or something after the war, but he wanted that captain slot. He felt that he had been overlooked or whatever, you know. And here I'd been given that captain slot, and he hadn't, and it bothered him. So all the people I was working with, I mean, my enlisted men, as my job as communications officer, all the enlisted men actually reported to this lieutenant who wanted my job. You know. So things didn't work out that well. You know, I had difficulty getting anything done properly. So finally, I get just frustrated. I just volunteered to be a forward observer. That's what I thought I was going to be. You know. So then I went and worked as a forward observer for 3 or 4 months until, you know, I served to various places, and that finding targets and adjusting the artillery fire on when it turned out we were facing Chinese troops. And we worked at various OPs, observation posts, and one of them I worked at for a short time was the one that actually belonged to the division G4, which is the Division Intelligence Officer, who was David Eisenhower, then the President's son. So that was a very nice position, place to work. But then I, you know, worked at various places until finally there was a breakthrough on one of our flanks, and the Chinese pushed the Korean division back, and so we all had to move from our guns had to be moved, and the forward observers had to be moved, and we had to be moved to work in a different direction. Instead of looking north, we were looking east. You know, but in any case, that soon changed, and by that time they decided I could stay back with the guns. I was going to be the reconnaissance officer. So I stayed. I didn't go back up on the OPs anymore. I stayed with the guns as the reconnaissance officer, and one of the things I did was to lead convoys when they switched infantry. The infantry didn't have enough trucks to move them all, so they get trucks from artillery and from everybody else to move the infantrymen, because we were the 3rd Infantry Division. We had American infantry, but it was also, they weren't on the line all the time, and every few months they put in Turks or Greeks or Belgians or, you know, different troops, and we moved them, the Americans out to a rest area and put the other ones in and whatever. So that, I did that, and then in July, the war ended. And that's this picture I got here, is a picture of me holding a paper that says truce signed or something. And I guess that truce is still in effect. This is a combat veterans. This is the 9th Field Artillery Battalion that I was in, but this is the picture of me holding a newspaper that says truce signed. So that was a happy day, and then not that long afterwards, about a month or so afterwards, we were able to go home. So at least it was based on points. And if you were in the front lines, you got 4 points, and if you were in the back lines, you got 2 points or something. And I've been there 9 months, I guess, or whatever it was, so I had enough points, 36 points or something, so I got to go home. And so they took us down to Incheon, and we were going out on a barge to a troop ship to get on this troop ship. And I remember we passed another barge coming in that was just filled with cases of beer. They were, I guess, bringing in beer for the troops, and that was good. And we got on this troop ship, and where I'd flown over in just 2 or 3 days, it took us like a month to get home, you know. And it was interesting. And we landed in San Francisco, and we all wanted to go into San Francisco to the top of the Mark or something like that. And instead, they marched the officers off the boat, and we got on a bus. And then they put nets on the side of the boat, and the troops, the enlisted men, had to climb down these nets in the landing craft. And then the landing craft went up the harbor to the place where the bus took the officers, which was a camp, I think in Pittsburgh, in California. Then they put us on trains there, and or a train, because they were going to take us to Camp Carson, Colorado, to process us out, you know, out the service. And but all the officers and particularly the enlisted men were frustrated because they had been looking forward to going to San Francisco. So we didn't get a chance. We were on this train, and the train stopped for some water or something in a little town in. The first stop was a little town in Utah or someplace like that, and about half the guys left the train. We had like 1,000 men hit this saloon in this little town in Utah or something. And so the state police and everybody was trying to get us back on the train. And so finally we got back on the train. We ended up in Camp Carson, Colorado, and got our discharge. And I remember coming home, I flew into Minneapolis Airport. And this friend of mine that I'd met on the boat had been an infantry officer, and he had all kinds of ribbons. He had a Silver Star, and he had all this. And my mother had been a secretary to the base commander at our local army post, and so she was conscious of this sort of thing. And so I had these 2 skimpy rows of ribbons or whatever it was. I had like 4 rows or something. And the first thing she said when she saw me is, "How come you don't have everything this man has?" You know? So I didn't have the answer other than that. I just done what I'd been told to do. You know. So that was my experience in war. So the next, within a day or two, I was back at my old job at the advertising firm, driving my own car. You know, it was just 3 years. That was it. You know. It was. I think it was a very, for me, you know, not for everybody certainly, but for me, the way things worked out was a very worthwhile experience. And I'm glad that rather than stay working in that swimming pool at Camp McCoy, that I had gone to OCS and to Korea. So that's it.
Okay, so we're just going to ask you a little fun type of question. So what was like, how was it being in the military? Like, how was the rule? How are their rules, and how was the food and things like that?
How was the rules?
Yeah, what were their rules, and like how was the food taste good?
The food and the rules. It's amazing how good the food was comparatively, I mean, considering the problems and so forth. I remember the first meal I had when I got to my new unit was Thanksgiving dinner, and they had roast turkey and everything else. Now when you were on the observation post, obviously you didn't have that sort of thing, but the guns, they had a mess, you know, they had cooks and they had everything, and they tried to do the best they could. The only problem was that, say, if a beef carcass came into Pusch or something, and it came all the way up to the MLR, by the time it got to the MLR, you didn't have any steak left or anything, you know. I mean, everybody along the line was taking the best parts. So when it got to us, it was not the best parts, but it's amazing how well they did, considering what they had. Now, another thing, in Korea, about 1/3 of our troops, as I remember, some large percentage was Korean. And so eventually a lot of the cooks ended up being Korean too and so forth. And so we had kind of sometimes Korean things, you know, and we had rice and whatever. But the food was pretty good, and in the States, in many cases, very good. Talking about, I remember one time we were talking about, I was a battery commander for ROTC troops at Fort Sill in Texas A&M, and I remember one time when I was back there, the troops, these Texas A&M cadets started stamping and making noise in the mess hall because they said they weren't getting enough milk. They would only get 1 carton of milk a day or something like that, so they were having like a mini riot, I mean, as far as making noise and so on. So they called me and I came in and I stood on the table and I told them that, you know, as far as I knew, most Army troops in the United States weren't getting any milk, you know, let alone 1 carton. So they didn't have much grounds to complain. But that's the only time I can remember any really organized complaint about the food. Now, as far as the rules, you know, that kind of depended on where you were and who it was, but it all made sense generally. I wasn't conscious of anything that was way out of line. In OCS, the upperclassmen would harass you, but that's to be expected.
Do you have any like fun memories with the guys you were with in basic training or served with?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of fun memories. I honestly can't remember many of the names, but like when I look at pictures and so forth. And I went to one reunion up in Plant City of 9th of my battalion, but from Korea, you know. But I didn't know any of them. They weren't in my battalion at the time, or my batteries anyway, at the time I was there. And one thing I did notice though, that they all wore hearing aids. That's the reason I have to wear it too, is because it's very noisy work. And you know, if you're at the guns, it's an explosion, or if you're at the OP, sometimes you get on the top of the bunker or something if they're firing at you. So there are very few people ever made it without some hearing loss. And I have my 2 hearing aids are my main injury, I guess. Everything else worked out fine.
Was there any interesting artillery that you came across during your time serving?
Were there any interesting what?
Artillery that you came across, like any interesting bombs or bombers or guns or anything?
Boy, oh boy, I don't hear you. I got only interesting...
Any interesting artillery?
Artillery?
Yes, that you came across during your time of service.
Well, it was all interesting, but it's all been replaced by rockets now. You know, in other words, none of it. I don't think any of the artillery we used is still used in the Army. I don't know for sure, but I think it's mostly rockets. And I think ours mostly dated to World War II or even World War I. But we didn't have rockets, and they had helicopters, and we had aircraft and so forth. But the Army has changed a lot, and even the rifles and so forth. You know, they have automatic rifles, and we were basically the same as World War II. I don't know. I wouldn't recognize the Army now, I don't think.
Well, was there anyone in particular that sent you mail regularly, or anyone you wrote home to a lot?
I'm sorry, I still can't. I'm having trouble. I said, is there anything negative?
No, is there anyone who regularly sent you mail overseas, or anyone you wrote home to?
My mother, and I had a girlfriend, and they, back in Fort Sill, I had a girlfriend, and she sent me cookies and things, you know. And I remember one time she sent me something, I guess cookies and so forth, in a box that was a shoe box that said purple pumps or something, you know. In other words, it was obviously women's shoes and a sexy style and a sexy color, you know. And so that box was very, you know, I can remember having that box in my bunker, And people would always remarking about the box. Where'd you get that? You know? I could have probably sold that box for quite a bit of money.
Did your brother also join any type of...
No, my brother was younger. He was a year and a half younger. And he joined the reserves, and he became a master sergeant in the reserve. But he didn't have to go to Korea. He just was able to stay there, and he was working too. He was out of school and working. And he was able to stay home and with his regular job and just go to summer camp and things like that. But he was in the reserves. And I guess by the time he was old enough, maybe the war was even over. I don't think they were drafting even anymore. See, that was a different kind of a war. That was a short one. That only lasted like 3 years or something.
Was there any sort of homecoming celebration once you returned home?
Was there any homecoming celebration?
Yes, and who was waiting for you when you returned home?
My mother and my brother. And I'm sure we had a nice dinner or something, but there was no party or anything. I remember we visited friends of our family at various times in the next week or so, you know, just they'd welcome me home. But there wasn't any big celebration or anything.
Okay, how did your service and experience in the war affect your life?
Well, I think it gave me confidence, and I don't know. I think it was a positive. That's what I was saying. I think it was a positive experience for me. For many people, it's not, because it can be you could get killed or badly injured. But for me, it was a positive experience. And I don't think that we should have wars for that, though. But I don't think that I'm not necessarily against it, some sort of service, like say the Israelis do, where people have to go and serve a year or so. I think maybe that would be good.
Is there anything you would like to add to this interview that we forgot to ask? We forgot to mention?
No, I think I've probably said way more than I should say. I've been taking too much time.
No, that's okay.
No, but I enjoyed it, and I think of things. I think of pleasant things mostly.
Well, we just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do our interview for us. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the work that you did in the Army.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it too. I appreciate you. Thank you. That's very nice.